Prime Video's new show from the Expanse's authors is closer to Star Trek than Battlestar Galactica. The Expanse and Battlestar Galactica are quite often discussed for their similarities, but Amazon's upcoming replacement for the former actually has far more in common with the Star Trek franchise. Although the end of The Expanse Season 6 would seem to mean the show is done, I was thrilled to discover the two authors who penned the source material are also behind The Captives' War, another Amazon space opera. I like The Expanse's various nods to Battlestar, but knowing that Star Trek is a great influence on the authors this time around is very exciting. Of course, the Star Trek timeline is one of the most expansive in sci-fi history. So comparing a project to the iconic franchise arguably doesn't explain much about what it'll be about, as there are a lot of Star Trek TV shows and movies. However, the saga boasts many tropes of the genre that it helped to establish and popularize. So The Captives' War sounds like it will have a vast toolbox at its disposal for high-concept sci-fi storytelling. The Captives' War is closer to Star Trek, whereas The Expanse was more like Battlestar Galactica. Battlestar Galactica tried its best to be a relatively grounded space opera. There weren't any aliens, and most of those opposing the human characters were either other humans or artificial lifeforms called Cylons. Similarly, The Expanse largely stayed away from anything that could be considered too beyond the realm of possibility. Alien storylines started to creep into the story, but only in a passive kind of way. Overall, both shows remained focused on the struggles of humanity. Inversely, The Captives' War strays much further from the path. Only one novel in the planned Captives' War series has currently been published, and it's called The Mercy of the Gods. The story revolves around a group of humans taken captive by a nefarious alien race known as the Carracks. Because extraterrestrial life isn't an active focus in The Expanse or Battlestar Galactica, the most direct comparison is to Star Trek, which is a franchise so large that there have already been many stories about humans being held captive by aliens. There are sure to be differences too, but it's a great basis for comparison. The Captives' War's proximity to Star Trek ensures it won't just be an Expanse clone, because James S.A. Corey is teaming up with Amazon again to create another space opera based on their source material. It sounds like the formula is set up to essentially rehash The Expanse. The show did very well for the platform, so I wouldn't have been surprised if that had turned out to be the case. Thankfully, The Captives' War sounds as though it's going to be a very different kind of space opera to The Expanse and Battlestar Galactica, and the Star Trek influence should inject new life into Corey's signature storytelling techniques. In the ever-shifting universe of science fiction television, few names hold the kind of gravitational pull that The Expanse commands. Its gritty realism, dense political intrigue, and science-rooted world-building earned it a spot among the genre's modern classics. Now, the creators behind that celebrated series, James S.A. Corey, the pen name for authors Daniel Abraham and Ty Frank, have beamed up a new project for Prime Video. But while expectations might steer viewers toward another dark and dusty corridor of interplanetary geopolitics, this new series charts a different course, one that boldly goes in a more hopeful direction. Despite the pedigree Mercy Point, the title of the new show, a working title for now, is not The Expanse 2.0. Instead, it shares far more spiritual DNA with Star Trek than with Battlestar Galactica, or even its own predecessor. The show marks a tonal pivot, a love letter to classic optimism in space storytelling, with all the philosophical musings and interstellar diplomacy that implies. The bright future returns. Since Battlestar Galactica's critically acclaimed reimagining in 2004, the sci-fi television landscape has leaned increasingly grim. From the 100 to Foundation, space became a place where hope went to die. Even Star Trek's modern iterations Picard, Discovery have been tinged with trauma and war. But Mercy Point aims to restore that shimmering sheen of utopia. Set in the 24th century aboard a deep space humanitarian outpost, the series focuses on the crew of the medical vessel Mercy Point, whose mission is to provide aid and diplomacy on the fringes of a fragile galactic alliance. Think Star Trek, The Next Generation, but with a stronger emphasis on ethical dilemmas, first contact complications, and saving lives instead of taking them. We wanted to tell a story where the stakes weren't just survival or war, says Frank in a recent Prime Video press briefing. What if the goal was understanding, healing, literally and figuratively? From belters to benevolence, the shift in tone may surprise fans of The Expanse, whose complex and often cynical portrayal of future humanity leaned into the raw consequences of colonization and capitalism in space. But the seeds of idealism were always there, hidden in characters like James Holden, whose quixotic belief in truth and justice often clashed with the pragmatism around him. Mercy Point magnifies that part of the duo's storytelling ethos. The protagonists aren't politicians or soldiers, they're scientists, diplomats, and doctors. And while the series doesn't shy away from conflict, No Good Sky Fee does, it does insist on searching for solutions over supremacy. In the pilot episode, for example, the crew is dispatched to mediate a plague outbreak on a distant mining colony. But as they investigate, it becomes clear that the illness might be the result of corporate sabotage, and exposing the truth could destabilize relations between two galactic powers. It's classic moral gray area, yet the crew's determination to prioritize life over politics is where the show finds its heart. Star Trek vibes without the uniforms. What makes Mercy Point feel closer to Star Trek than Battlestar Galactica isn't just the setting or the tone, it's the fundamental belief in progress. Where Galactica was a survivalist parable soaked in existential dread, Mercy Point carries the philosophical torch of Trek's brightest moments. Each episode poses a new ethical question. Can artificial life have religious faith? Should aid be given to those who deny responsibility for a disaster? What does truth mean when species perceive reality differently? But don't expect transporter beams and prime directives. Mercy Point resists being a direct homage. Its tech is more grounded, its politics more nuanced, and its world-building carries The Expanse's signature realism, just with a little more hope and a lot more compassion. The writers have also leaned heavily into xenoanthropology and alien cultures, creating species that are more than just latex foreheads and universal translators. One key crew member, a telepathic plant-based being named Lou, communicates through harmonic resonance and challenges the very idea of verbal communication. Another, a genderless synthetic with a moral compass that's evolving in real time, brings shades of both Data and HAL 9000 without being a copy of either. A cast that carries the cosmos. If The Expanse succeeded in part because of its ensemble cast, Mercy Point appears to be following suit. The show stars Amira Van Underground, Star Trek, Picard as Commander Elise Rourke, a seasoned negotiator with a past in galactic peacekeeping. Opposite her is Rahul Kohli Midnight Mass as Dr. Aureen Sethi, a brilliant but disillusioned xenopathologist searching for meaning after losing his family in a border skirmish. The chemistry between characters feels organic and lived in. Their banter is tinged with humor, their conflicts rooted in ideology rather than petty drama. And perhaps most importantly, they argue about ethics like it matters, which, in Good Sky Fee, is half the point. Why now? At a time when real-world headlines increasingly resemble dystopian scripts, Mercy Point offers something rare in modern science fiction: earnestness. The show doesn't wear its optimism as naivety, but as a challenge. Can humanity still be good? Can we choose empathy over ego,